I can get a 17-year-old box of candy?
Break out the hairspray and crank up the Walkman. We're going back to the 80s to relive the top 10 candies that defined a generation. So, what does a blockbuster movie have to do with 80s candy? Or baseball? Or garbage? Well, let's find out.
We're in the past.
Airheads.
Miss Airhead at your service.
First up on the 80s candy docket is the taffy-tastic treat Airheads. These perfectly chewy and flavor-blasted candies have been manufactured by the Perfetti von Mel Company since 1985 and are still going strong today. They've recently surged in popularity thanks to a TikTok trend that involves shaking each Airheads packet to change the shape and flavor of each one. While it might be new to some, this classic technique was first discovered on schoolyard playgrounds back in the 80s and is an old standard for those in the know.
Only the chosen ones may enter.
The long strips of sugary goodness are available in more than a dozen flavors, and in addition to the strips, can also be found as Airheads Extremes, Gummies, Soft Bites, Bites, Filled Ropes, and even Airheads flavored chewing gum. To keep up with all this candy demand, Perfetti von Mel manufactures it in a 120,000 square foot factory that churns out 4 million strips of the stuff every day. The factory suffered an explosion in 2015, but with a name like Airheads, you knew they'd be back up and floating in no time to keep the 80s tradition alive for decades to come.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Big League Chew.
Looks like a strand of Big League Chew.
Batter up! There were plenty of big-name and big-money Major League Baseball stars to find prominence in the 1980s, but none of them ever hit a home run as satisfying as this entry. In an effort to steer kids away from the addictive habit of chewing shredded tobacco that their baseball heroes were so fond of, Big League Chew's shredded bubblegum debuted in May of 1980. Originally only available in classic bubblegum flavor and pink color, BLC has evolved over the years to include themed flavors like ground ball grape, wild pitch watermelon, swingin' sour apple, and big rally blue raspberry.
Blue raspberry or cherry?
The pouches of shredded gum are still the biggest hit, but you can also find it in gumballs in a 3-inch baseball-shaped container and an 18-inch bat-shaped container. Or in the case of an extended doubleheader, you can opt for the 240-piece bucket of gumballs that weighs just over 3 pounds. Becoming an intricate part of baseball lore all through the 1980s, Big League Chew's fun and safe reputation has made it an official partner of USA Baseball and the Baseball Hall of Fame. By April of 2023, the company announced it had officially sold more than 1 billion pouches of Big League Chew in the 43 years since throwing its first chewy flavor fastball.
Still going strong at 82.
Reese's Pieces.
Why the are there no Reese's Pieces?
The mouth-watering wonder of Reese's chocolate and peanut butter combo stretches back way further than the 1980s, but this generationally defining version completely removed half of the equation. Originally introduced to Americans in September 1978, Hershey's had spent years developing Reese's Pieces as a replacement for the discontinued Hersheyets, a tiny candy shell with a peanut butter filling but no chocolate component. They even used the same pellet-sized panning molds as Hersheyets to shape the treats in the same poppable size. And as much as they are beloved today, they wouldn't be as big if they hadn't received some Hollywood help from another 1980s pop culture icon.
Without me, you're nothing.
Early sales were decent after their 1970s introduction, but it wasn't until 1982 that Reese's Pieces would become permanently ingrained in American pop culture. Universal Studios and Hershey reached a $1 million deal to have Reese's Pieces featured in the sci-fi classic E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which was an instant hit in theaters that passed the original Star Wars as the highest-grossing movie ever and held that record for 11 years. That's a lot of eyeballs seeing Reese's Pieces on the big screen, and it translated to an increase in sales that was reportedly as high as 300%. Reese's Pieces then spent the rest of the 80s flying as high as E.T.'s spaceship.
We were young, we had momentum.
New to BabbleTop? Then how about hitting that subscribe button? You get all the candy nostalgia without the time-traveling DeLorean. Thanks. Skittles.
I don't know if you heard, but I dropped some Skittles.
The slogan didn't officially debut until 1994, but even back in the 80s, you could still taste the rainbow. Skittles got their start overseas as a British confection in the 1970s, and they began exporting to the USA in 1979. However, domestic production on American soil didn't start until 1982, and that was when things really took off. Sold in the original varieties of strawberry, grape, lime, lemon, and orange, the product line eventually saw expansion grow bigger than a hair-sprayed 80s hairdo. New taste experiences like wild berry, tropical, smoothies, bright side, and sour have all graced our taste buds in the decades since.
It's a real blessing.
In addition to the classic candy, you can also find Skittles Chewies, Skittles Gummies, and even Skittles Littles. The brand has become synonymous over the years with unconventional marketing campaigns backed by the Taste the Rainbow slogan. The odd campaigns included the financing of a 2019 Broadway musical about Skittles and filming a 2018 Super Bowl commercial that was only ever shown to one lucky fan. But it was the perfectly balanced taste and texture that made Skittles famous in the 80s and still wins us over today. If you ask us, the advertising can get as wild as it wants, as long as the only wild parts of the candy are found in wild berry Skittles.
It's time to get buck wild.
Runts.
All that's left is banana runts. That's the worst runt.
Here's one time the runt of the litter finally gets its due. Marketed as a fruit basket in the palm of your hand, these crafty candies definitely weren't what 80s parents meant when they said kids should eat more fruit. Runts first hit store shelves in 1982 and were a big hit for the rest of the decade. Molded in shapes of tiny fruit and flavor to match, the original fabulous 5 fruits were banana, cherry, orange, lime, and strawberry. Unlike popular gummy candies that also came with the shapes and tastes of the supermarket produce section, Runts introduced an addictive, crunchy texture of a candy shell wrapped around a compressed sugar center.
It's actually pretty tasty.
The shape and bright colors also stood out in a competitive market of mini candy handhelds like Mike and Ike's, Dots, and M&M's. Thanks to excellent sales throughout the 80s, these little runts are still going today, although the fruit flavors have rotated in and out, changing once in the 1990s and twice again in the 2000s. The green fruit has seen the most changes, with lime being swapped out for watermelon and then green apple. The most important green for 80s kids, however, was everyone else being green with envy if you showed up with a box of runts.
You swaggin'? You swaggin'?
Nerds.
Nerd alert! Nerd alert!
If Runts gave a more positive reputation to the little guy, then surely glasses-wearing geeks felt pretty good about this next item. The 1980s gave rise to a series of comedy films called Revenge of the Nerds, and it turns out revenge might be best served in the form of a tiny candy. Possibly inspired by the success of Runts, Nerds were released 1 year later and by the same manufacturer, but were even tinier. The sour/sweet handfuls were just slightly larger individually than Pop Rocks and became a massive success even with their miniature size. Kids loved the candy, but also the adorable cartoon nerds on the front of every box.
Every single one.
The cardboard box itself was also fun, with 2 separate flavors in 2 separate compartments that each had retractable sliding openings. Just 2 years after the introduction of Nerds to the nationwide market, the National Candy Wholesalers Association officially named Nerds Candy of the Year in 1985. Classic Nerds are still available today, but they've branched out to also be found in Nerd Gummy Clusters, Nerds Rope, and Big Chewy Nerds. No matter which kind you prefer, even if you're a geek, a dork, or a dweeb, you'll always be cool as long as you've got Nerds.
I'll be the coolest kid ever.
Twix.
Twix is the only candy with the cookie crunch.
2 is better than 1, and that's especially true when it comes to candy. Twix has been doubling up our candy bar experience for decades, but it first rose to prominence in the 1980s. The history of Twix goes back even further than that, with the concept being based on the recipe for caramel shortbread pastries, which themselves are an adaptation of Scottish shortbread that was invented all the way back in the 12th century. These Scottish ties directly explain Twix's origins when it was first invented in the United Kingdom in 1967, but it took more than a decade before the treat was popular enough to cross the Atlantic Ocean and debut on American shores in 1979.
Our origin story begins Candies.
It took a few months before things caught on with American chocolate lovers, but by the time the calendar turned to 1980, Twix was off and running as a major hit for the rest of the decade. Today, Twix bars officially call the USA home, with every Twix distributed from coast to coast being manufactured in Tennessee. Modern varieties include cookie dough, salted caramel, and cookies and cream, as well as limited edition holiday Santas. The best part is, no matter which one of them you pick, you'll always get two.
What? I need more.
Skor.
Brought you all your favorite candies.
Here's another excellent 80s candy bar that came out a couple of years after Twix, but was actually designed to compete with a different candy bar. The 1981 origins of Skor itself stretch back to the 1928 creation of the Heath bar, which Skor is directly patterned after. The Heath's early invention meant it was handmade with old-timey techniques, including a rolling knife, copper kettle, and marble slab. And the enduring success of the bar inspired the Hershey Company to create a more delicious doppelganger that they dubbed Skor. Hershey's copycat version hit store shelves in 1981, more buttery and crunchy than the Heath, and foregoing the ground almonds of its competition.
I smell toast. And almonds. I smell almond toast.
It's also thinner and crispier, creating that mouth-watering snap with every bite. But contrary to the intentions of Hershey, it turns out neither Heath nor Skor directly affected the other one's sales throughout the 1980s. And in the era of the Cold War, a toffee bar war never materialized. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Hershey outright bought the Heath bar's parent company and has continued to manufacture both bars ever since. So, thanks to this 80s creation, today there are two top-shelf toffee options for candy lovers to choose from.
Both great options. Maybe put it to a vote?
Hubba Bubba Bubble Tape.
Hubba Bubba over Double Bubble? You're crazy.
Bubblegum in its various forms and flavors has defined many generations, but the legacy of this uniquely chew-tastic concept literally rolled right out of the 80s. Hubba Bubba was introduced to markets in 1979, just in time to be a defining gum of the 1980s generation. Rather than being sold in sticks, balls, or pieces like most gum, Hubba Bubba came in soft cubed chunks. But a little over a decade after that bubbly outside-the-box idea, an entirely new shape of gum would become Hubba Bubba's calling card. Released nationally in 1988 and predating the fruit-by-the-foot rollable fruit snack by 4 years, Bubble Tape's amazingly fun and interactive introduction was a revolution for candy at the time.
Sensational.
The product was a 6-foot strip of thin, tape-like chewing gum contained in a plastic dispenser that kept the gum sticky enough to chew, but not stick the whole roll into a ball. Bubble Tape was a true achievement of 80s candy engineering, requiring the cooperation of 2 certified plastic injection mold-making companies to perfect. The dispensers were being shipped out at a rate of more than 1 million a week at Bubble Tape's peak, and the fun continues to roll on all these years later.
I just keep winning!
Honorable mention, Hubba Bubba Soda.
It's time to get a soda.
Soda time!
As we near the end of our list, go ahead and give this video a like as we look at an entry that doesn't quite qualify since it's only inspired by a candy instead of being one itself. Hubba Bubba's Bubble Tape wasn't the only bubblegum spin-off that took off in the 1980s. This one still has the bubbles, except they're the carbonated kind instead of the ones you blow. Although Hubba Bubba chewing gum was invented by the Wrigley Chewing Gum Company, its soda counterpart wasn't even owned or distributed by Wrigley. Inspired by snow cones that were made with a pink bubblegum-flavored syrup, Renaissance man Stephen Roeder came up with the bubblegum soda by mixing the flavor syrup with club soda.
Mixed.
He had to secure the licensing rights from Wrigley to use the Hubba Bubba name, but after the paperwork was handled, his drink hit Midwest American markets in a 1988 limited release. The novelty is still in demand today, although the limited production numbers make finding a can difficult. An empty can on eBay usually lists around $80, while an unopened can of Diet Hubba Bubba was once listed on the site at over $200. The soda was specifically designed as a limited production run, and once it was gone, the bubble officially burst.
I'm gonna miss it.
Garbage candy.
Garbage. Okay, give me garbage.
One man's trash is another man's treasure, but you can bet the final item on our list is anything but junk. Pez dispensers first pioneered the idea of a poppable candy and opened its first American factory in 1973. But it would be a decade later when garbage candy would put a delightfully trashy twist on the idea. A miniature plastic garbage can with a pop-open lid acted as the dispenser, while molded candy shapes imitated the kinds of things you might find inside the average American trash bag. Dog bones, fish bones, tin cans, bottles, and even old worn-out shoes put a delicious spin on your everyday disposables.
I love trash. Yum, yum, trash.
And the gross-out factor was a big hit with kids. The successful appeal even inspired Garbage Candy's creator, Art Spiegelman, to later create another nasty 80s classic, Garbage Pail Kids trading cards. The candy itself is remembered as being less tangy than Pez, but more flavorful than Smarties. But the whole idea itself eventually faded into obscurity once the fad of gross but fun children's marketing cooled down. Still, this might be the only time in history that garbage didn't stink.
It was amazing.
Stay for more and tap or click another great video. Hit that subscribe button and ring that bell to join our notification squad.